The Imola GP didn't ruin Mercedes' plans to bring their new upgrade to Monaco, the upcoming GP, and while the risk is very high that they won't be able to collect the needed data, the Brackley-based squad showed that they don't have any more time to wait. With the new changes to the front suspension, sidepod design and floor, Mercedes is chasing more rear downforce to try and catch up to the RB19. But is this actually possible in 2023? Join us as we go through the massive upgrade package with a Shub, who was a former Red Bull Aerodynamics Engineer, as he'll be sharing his Formula One wisdom with you in terms of what the new changes are and what we should expect from them. The new technical regulation in 2022 saw Mercedes introduce a new sidepod design, one that Hamilton wasn't particularly happy about, but Russell was able to score good results with. To top that off, the team continued with the same philosophy entering 2023, and now that they've finally seen that it doesn't work and they need to change it, Mercedes is ready for the next big change, a complete shift of direction and a new development path for the remainder of the season. But even with this in mind, Mercedes may see some issues in terms of how their car will perform from Monaco onwards, because not only have they decided to bring their upgrade package to one of the riskiest, if not the riskiest races of the season, but they'll also be limited in the process of collecting data. Russell and Hamilton would have to be extremely careful in Monaco, and they won't be able to push the car to its maximum extent because there's only so much room to do so in the narrow streets of the kingdom. Nonetheless, Mercedes has decided to make this risky move, but what exactly are they chasing with this new philosophy? According to Andrew Shovlin, now that it's definitely confirmed that the team is taking a new approach in 2023, the number one thing that they need to tackle is the lack of rear downforce. Over the course of 2 seasons, Mercedes has built 2 different cars. One that had a too strong rear end and one that had a too strong front end, meaning that the current version of the car is too pointy and lacks a ton of rear downforce. So how do you tackle that? By adding a new floor and introducing an entirely new design to the car, something we'll talk about later in this video with our expert. Mercedes have managed to keep the fans' expectations low, with Wolff saying that there isn't such a thing as a silver bullet that will bring them a 1 second per lap advantage in just one package. Although Hamilton has requested this from his team to be competitive with the raging RB19, but it's just not possible for Wolff to guarantee even half a second of an advantage, with the numbers being brought down to 2 to 3 tenths per second if everything goes well. What Mercedes desperately hopes with the new upgrades is that they'll be setting the new baseline and the new benchmark for what they should do furthermore with the W14. Obviously, this won't be the only package they're bringing to the 2023 season, something we'll get deeper into with the former Red Bull Aerodynamics Engineer. But if the foundation of the car's basics and dynamics are set in Monaco, then rest assured that the wind tunnel time that Mercedes is relying on in the later half of the season will definitely propel them in the right direction. And if you have a solid baseline to work on, you will never wonder what is wrong with the car, because you'll now have all the pieces of the puzzle. All Mercedes needs to do is utilize them properly. But Monaco is still ahead of us, and we're yet to see whether Mercedes made the right move by bringing the upgrades to the kingdom rather than waiting 1 more week and bringing them to Barcelona. This is a track that is very unpredictable and a lot of things can happen, but due to the high downforce requirements of it, it seems like Mercedes are hoping they can score a pole position or lock the front row, because if they do that, the only way they can be beaten is if they fail in the pit stop or suffer from reliability issues. So what does Shub, the former Red Bull Aerodynamics Engineer, think about the direction that Mercedes is moving in?
Andrew Shovlin, in the last race debrief that the Mercedes Formula One team puts out, said that they were chasing new directions after the Bahrain Grand Prix. And what does he mean by this? Like, what do new directions refer to? Well, it's trying to refer to the slim sidepod philosophy of the Mercedes versus the wide sidepod philosophy that both the Red Bull and the Ferrari are running. And what do this side pod philosophy actually got to do with aerodynamics? Well, pretty much a lot of things, but they can be narrowed down into two things. First is the front wheel wake management, and the second is how the side pods land up dividing the air or distributing the air to the rear end of the car. And let us try and understand both of these.
Now, chasing a new direction has been established ever since Bahrain, but which direction has Mercedes chosen? It seems like with their understanding that the new side pod design is not working the way they would want it to, it needs to be wider and bulkier, similar to what Red Bull and Ferrari are doing with their cars. In order for you to understand how Mercedes will improve if they change their side pod design, which they will, you need to understand how the bulkier side pod design is helping the car's performance by doing the two things that Shub has mentioned earlier in the video. Therefore, let's not waste your time as we hear from the expert himself.
So let us first talk about the front wheel wake management, right? The way Red Bull deals with this is that it creates a pressurization zone which tends to push or create outwash such that the wake of the tire lands up going away from the car. Now, the Mercedes cis tube wing was supposed to do something similar by having a vortex which would be able to create that outwash, but it looks like this really cool idea. Don't get me wrong, the idea is really great, but this seems to be not a consistent idea across all the platforms that an F1 car goes through. So they would want to change that. And the second bit, how the wide side pod philosophy with the undercut distributes the incoming air into two phases, one that goes over the side pods and lands up feeding the rear suspension and the beam wing, and one that goes through the side pod and across the side pod in a way feeding to the diffuser through the mouse hole. And I would highly recommend you to take a look at the pictures of the flow whiz that the Red Bull has, which demonstrate this beautifully. So they have a mechanism in place that feeds the diffuser and the floor, and a mechanism in play that feeds the rear suspension and the beam wing. And this allows them to have an extremely efficient and powerful flow.
Obviously, this is a part that Mercedes has been severely lacking, and it was one of the main reasons why the reshuffle in the technical staff actually happened, with Mike Elliott taking his old place back and James Allison being brought in as the new CTO of the team. It's safe to say that he's one of the genius masterminds in the sport, and with his imprint all over the newest upgrades of the W14, it's safe for us to expect that he'll be delivering the much needed results for the Silver Arrows. Yet you might wonder why the creation of the Vortex and the current side pod design don't work for Mercedes, and the answer is simple: consistency. Our expert has his say on this matter, so let's hear more from him.
While the Mercedes again depends mostly on the vortex that is driven by the cis tube wing to downwash the flow and feed it towards the rear end of the car, but there's no real direction or distribution of air given. And because it depends on a vortex, it means there are lots of parameters that drive the strength and the position of that vortex. And as the car attitude changes, these parameters also change. So there's not really a consistent mechanism, in my opinion, to feed the rear end of the car. And even if there is, it's not really as powerful as the undercut mechanism that the Red Bull and the Ferrari have inspired in these regulations of 2022.
But is copying in the DNA of Mercedes? Not until now it wasn't. The Silver Arrows have always been known to bring original parts to their cars, with them successfully implementing the dual-axis steering system in 2020 and the entire grid causing a lot of drama for it. This time, although they have openly admitted that they wouldn't care if their side pod design is copied by Aston Martin or Red Bull, it seems like they're bringing a mixture of what's already known to the grid and the Mercedes special, with the Silver Arrows always adding some originality and innovation to their parts. Many of you have understood why the side pod and floor changes are needed for the W14 to perform the way it should, and we need to explain to you why the front suspension will be brought to Monaco as well. So let's hear about the front suspension's changes.
Mercedes have normally been very original with their design, and I'm expecting a wide side pod philosophy car with a Mercedes flavor to it. But you might ask, why the new front suspension? And there are really two reasons. One is because the front suspension acts as a bridge between the airflow coming from the front wing and going into the side pods and going into the floor. So you really need to have a front suspension redesign if you're chasing a new philosophy on the car. And the second one is something to do with ride heights. There's been a lot of noise in terms of how the Red Bull is a mechanically stable car, in the sense that it provides a beautiful stable platform for the aerodynamics to work effectively over a large range of ride heights. And I think that the change in the front suspension design has also got to do with the stability of the mechanical platform required for the aero platform to work as effectively as possible in the desired range of ride heights.
With all this in mind, Mercedes will have a lot on their shoulders to prove that they have indeed found the right direction to move in, but will it be the correct one? Time will tell, and even though Monaco is the perfect circuit in terms of downforce requirements, it's definitely limiting the ability of Hamilton and Russell to extract the most performance out of their newly designed W14, something that we'll have to wait and see how it's going to play out. Shub also has his own YouTube channel called the F1 Aerodynamicist. You can find the link to his channel in the description down below.